The reason that you're even having that struggle is because you had already been systematically disconnected from your intuition. And once that happens, you really have nothing to do except for grasp for clarity outside of yourself. But every time you grasp for it, it might be something that's not good for you, something evil, something that's leading you away from God. That chronic internalized self-doubt becomes one of the major impacts of disconnecting from your own sense of decision-making and intuition. Welcome to the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel, which aims to provide you with language, tools, and guidance in your journey towards personal and relational wholeness. We'll discuss topics ranging from psychology, spirituality, leadership, sexuality, and more. My name is Michael, and I will be your guide for stimulating musings and host for insightful interviews with thought leaders, practitioners, and experts who have a thing or two to share about living an integrated and meaning-making life. Whether you're looking to deepen your connection with your interior world, overcome challenges in your relationships, or expand your psychosomatic horizons with fresh perspectives and paradigms, the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel offers a safe, playful, yet challenging space for dialogue and introspection. It is all a gift, so let's go enjoy it together. Welcome back to the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel. I am really excited to talk about this issue around decision making and why it is so difficult for those of us who've grown up in the common Christian myth and in an atmosphere that systematically disconnected us from our intuition, from our own knowledge and wisdom, and taught us to look outside of ourselves for confirmation, for guidance, and in many cases taught us to look outside of ourselves for how we should act, how we should be, what decisions we should make, sometimes big and other times very small and insignificant, because there was this belief that even the small decisions could have these massive impacts for the world, and that was ultimately the purpose. When I was a senior in college, I had the opportunity to go with a number of friends to Mardi Gras. And I remember feeling this rising desire. I wanted to experience this. I was a senior in college and had really not done much adventurous stuff. I had gone on a number of mission trips. In fact, a couple of summers, like full summers in Honduras, which were really adventurous, but they had this kind of purpose-drivenness to them, right? Like there was a reason. One of them was even, I got credit for it for my college course. But Mardi Gras had no purpose. Mardi Gras, from that perspective, it only had the purpose of enjoyment and experiencing something I never had experienced. And it had the purpose of being with friends. But the way I was taught to make decisions was essentially by way of evaluating a decision based on what it will provide for God's desires, right? Like for the kingdom. And that certainly couldn't involve decisions that I made for the purpose of connecting with just my friends. Or it certainly couldn't be doing something like going to Mardi Gras where there was going to be, sin and temptation all around me. So I didn't go. And I remember staying at home at my mom's and settling into this kind of hyper-spiritual space instead. That was kind of like, I look back on that and it really makes me sad because I did that so many times throughout my life. But this was one of those big ones where I decided I'm not going to do something that's fun. I have to stay and I have to go inward. I have to be with God. It was this sense that the anxiety of not doing that was too much. So this word decision actually comes from the Latin decisio, which means to cut away from, right? So like incision is like to cut in, decision is to cut away, to cut away from whatever that thing is. And it's ironic because to make a decision, to just make a decision underneath the umbrella of the common Christian myth for me was associated with cutting away from God. I couldn't make a decision because that would be like taking control of my life. And that was God's work, right? God was in control of my life. So I want you to sit with that. Like, decisions, do they create anxiety? Do decisions feel like an opportunity? Where do you find tension in decision making? Maybe there are some areas of life where you feel free to make decisions, but then other areas where it feels like, wow, you're just paralyzed with what to do. Notice if there is a voice that's telling you that you should find kind of the right way, or that there is so many wrong ways and you've got to discern which one's the right one. Decision making, is it something that connects you back to yourself, or is decision making something that inherently cuts you away from connection, and therefore you can't make decisions? Okay, so let's talk about how the common Christian myth has systematically disconnected you from desire, from your intuition. So I'm going to just start with this assumption. And I think, if you search your heart, as Obi-Wan would say to Luke, search your heart, search your feelings. We were taught to mistrust ourselves, like full stop. You have to mistrust yourself in order to be obedient. Obedience requires you to not think too highly of yourself, or to think too highly of what you want, or to take it too seriously. The verse that comes to my mind probably first is Proverbs 3. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. You can look at that verse positively and say, trust in the divine, and don't lean on your understanding around fear, or your understanding of like what is limited, like your limiting beliefs, right? Like, trust in the abundance of the universe, and don't lean on this kind of very small and scarcity-oriented understanding. But that's not how it got communicated. How it got communicated was trust in the Lord, which is outside of you, and don't lean on yourself, on your own understanding, which at the time that I was growing up, my own understanding was likely just what I wanted. It was what I desired. And so I learned to not lean on my desires or what I wanted. And then I had to search for some kind of divine voice that would reflect back to me what was a higher form of knowledge and wisdom and action. So it just kind of over time trained to not lean on myself, to not trust, to not put pressure on, in terms of don't let your intuition support you. Don't let it be a support. In fact, come away from that and find that externally. Jeremiah says something about the heart is deceitful above all things, which I had to look that up. I didn't even know where that was, but I've heard it before. And what it communicated doesn't matter the context. Literally doesn't fucking matter what the context is around a Bible verse, because that's the whole thing with the common Christian myth. Most of it's not even in the Bible, or it's snippets that just confirm the bias already in the mythology. So this idea that the heart is deceitful above all things, it taught me to not trust my heart, right? Don't trust that. It's the flesh. It's trying to guide you. It's actively trying to guide you away from God, right? So what is the heart? It's where there's passion, where there is love, where there is abundance. And to not be able to trust that, to in fact think that it is maliciously trying to lead me away from what is best for me, wow, like how could you possibly make a decision that is yours if you ultimately believe that your heart is deceiving you? God's thoughts are higher than your thoughts, and his ways are higher than your ways. So whatever your thoughts and whatever you want, whatever path you feel intuitively is drawing you, it's still not where God's is. And the implication there is like, well, you can lean on your own sense of what is best, but just so you know, whatever that is, God's is higher. So if you go a little higher, it's always going to be higher, which puts you in a bit of a rat race or hamster wheel of trying to figure out what's the best, what's the highest form. If you've created a reality around you, you've made a decision, well, how do you know if that decision is the best one? Because it could have been something even better. And then here's a amazing one here. Okay. We make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. I think the way I remembered as a kid was, man plans his path, but the Lord directs his steps, or something like that. And I mean, there's so much in that symbolically. If words create our reality, then our plans, like planning, you can't make plans because the Lord is actually determining your steps. Plans are these big things, right? Like I plan to do this. It's like I'm future casting how I'm going to be. I'm going to make a plan to do this. But if the Lord is the one directing your steps, I mean, there's no telling if where you're going to be is what you planned, because the Lord will likely determine steps that deviate you from those plans, right? Because also your plans are not the highest form of what God is wanting for you. So why make plans? You have to actually just trust the steps. Now, again, there's so much goodness in here if you see it from the perspective. Like as an adult, I look at that and I'm like, oh, okay. I can make plans. And as I move forward with those plans, there is this guiding, as my friend Lisette says, the grand organized design, God, is determining the steps that happen that unfold those plans. And by the way, my plans I made were rooted in a sense of desire and intuition. So they're good. They're like not bad. They're good. So there's this divine, energetic, abundant, benevolent, just like super present energy that is guiding me forward in that. But that's not how it got communicated. It's like, okay, if you make plans, just so you know, God's probably going to go a different direction. He's always deviating you from anything that you want, anything you desire, anything you intuit. And therefore, it's best to just not do those things and leave yourself open to the divine. Which also, like, I didn't make plans when I think about, like, Mardi Gras, that story I shared. I didn't want to make plans because it felt like it limited God. If I made a plan to do something, then, like, it actually cut me off from something God wanted to do with me or use me in some way, right? Oh, it was so functional. Oh, okay. This leads, these verses and how they got metabolized, has led most of us to have internalized self-doubt, right? You make a decision. Well, what if you're wrong? Like, what if you're wrong about the decision you make? Well, okay, well, maybe I should do this then. Like, what if you're wrong there? What if that's just a trick? I mean, the heart is deceitful, and like then you've got the Satan character thrown in there. It's like, yeah, well, he might be leading you astray, and throwing up little things that kind of pull you off the path. The reason that you're even having that struggle is because you had already been systematically disconnected from your intuition. And once that happens, you really have nothing to do except for grasp for clarity outside of yourself. But every time you grasp for it, it might be something that's not good for you. It might actually be something evil, something that's leading you away from God. So that chronic internalized self-doubt becomes one of the major impacts of disconnecting from your own sense of decision-making and intuition. Abdication of responsibility. The inability to make a decision because you're waiting for clarity from the divine. I see this often, right? I mean, it kind of goes back to this idea, like you're going to make a decision. Well, have you prayed about it? Have you, I mean, if you're going to make a decision about a house to buy, well, the common Christian myth taught me that it's wrong until proven right. Okay. So I'm approaching this point where I could be really excited. It's an adventure, but I'm actually approaching it with a pretty heavy atmospheric pressure of anxiety, because I need to know that this is right before I take action. And if I don't hear that it's right, it could actually be very much wrong. That is trying to look for a sign from a place of anxiety to begin with. Abdicating our sense of responsiveness to our own desires leaves us kind of open to this sense that we have to wait for confirmation, and then we start looking for it and trying to manufacture confirmation. I forget the word, but there's actually a word for this. Synchronicity is a word that's very Jungian, that talks about when the internal and the external line up, and you have these experiences like, oh my God, like I didn't do anything to cause this, but the thing that I have been wanting and feeling, I just experienced in something someone said, or an image that popped up, or on a billboard, and it's like it resonates so deeply, and it, right? It's just a knowing. But there's also this sense that like I've got to now look for signs. I've got to be hyper vigilant to my environment to feed back to me how I should be. And so people will look, like, oh, it was in my coffee creamer art. My latte art was a tree, and I'm going to move to Oregon. Well, you should move to Oregon anyway, because Oregon is the best state. That's just intuitively true. It's objective. So if you're looking for confirmation, this is your sign to move to Oregon. Okay, anyway, the other internalized impact is around decision paralysis. Certainly big decisions like buying a house. But it can come down into small decisions too. I experience this pretty often right now. It's 6 months into living on my own for the first time. There are many days when I have a lot of spaciousness. I have hours where I don't have a client call, and I don't have the kids. No one is requiring anything of me. There's no external stimulus saying, hey, Michael, you got to do this. Those are some of the hardest days, because I have been working for more of my life under the sense that I have to have confirmation, clarity before I act. And so going to a coffee shop or staying home and being more contemplative, or creating at home, or going out to a coffee shop and getting a lot of work done and being in an extroverted kind of environment, feel like a split, a crossroads. It's like a fork in the road. And if whichever you choose kind of will determine what kind of day you have. And there is a right answer. But even if I choose to go to a coffee shop, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to a coffee shop. Well, which one do I go to? What if I go to this one and the seat's gone? What if I go to this one and it's just super loud and like not the space that I was wanting? What if I want to try a new one? No, I should go and be at a coffee shop that I already know. Okay. Decision paralysis is massive, because it's essentially a result of paralyzing your decision-making function. And so as an adult, you're just trying to make these small decisions. Well, you were trained that even the small decisions were massive. And though you might not believe like God has a specific will for which coffee shop you go to, now that is in the unconscious, and it still guides and deactivates your ability to move forward, because it's the filtration system of knowing your intuition and taking action on it. This whole thing results in a split self. There becomes a war between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The conscious mind has something it wants, but the unconscious mind wants to keep you safe, and to make you right about what you believe at the deepest level. And if what you believe at the deepest level is that you can't trust yourself, then if you want to do something consciously, your unconscious mind is going to dig its heels in and not let you move forward, or at least constantly question and cast doubt on the decision you make, because it ultimately is not in alignment with what you truly believe at that unconscious level. So this is where we've already kind of talked about this, but God becomes the inner critic. The divine, Freud would call this the superego, right? It is the internalized collective message. It's kind of what I mean by the common Christian myth. The common Christian myth is the conscious, if you want to put it in Jungian terms, it's the conscious beliefs that is held by the collective. But those things are not stated, they are felt, they are internalized. And then they become the voice that filters, that critiques, or even questions what you do and how you live. That God voice is an internalized authority figure. And let's just sit with that for a second. That word authority, you've got the word author in it, right? There's something in you that is not aligned with what you want, what you desire. And so that becomes the thing in your unconscious that writes your life, that authors your life. If your unconscious believes that by making a decision, you are putting yourself in an unsafe place with God, with the universe, whatever, then you won't make decisions simply because you're afraid of being hurt. It's not safe to make decisions. You may also abdicate decision-making to a boss, to an organization that tells you how you should be. This is one way of understanding the MAGA cult, is you don't have to know, which is really good because you were never taught to know. So now you can project all of that knowledge, all of the critical thinking onto an external image, i.e. Trump, and that image will tell you what you should do and how you should be. That's an exaggerated example, but that's how people get to that state, is the authorship of your life becomes something outside of you, something that is disconnected or minimally misaligned with what you want and what you need. This also leads to spiritual bypassing. If you want to read more about spiritual bypassing, Connie Zweig's book, Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path, is an excellent book to understand that concept a bit more. But spiritual bypassing when it comes to decision making looks like constantly scanning for a sign. Constantly scanning for God to show up in the sand, in the latte art. And when you're in that state, whether you know it or not, you're not in a place of openness. You're not in a place of even being able to receive. Neurologically, you're in your amygdala. Your limbic system is activated for fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Okay? And those actions that come out of the fear response are not able to hear intuition, to take authentic action or make decisions that align with the soul. That framework or that mindset is one that's based on survival. And so if you're trying to make decisions that lead towards the life you want, towards abundance, but you're always in a survival state because that's triggered by the decision making, then life will always be about surviving. You will just continue to create survivor situations that not only look for crisis, but create it. You create crisis because crisis is actually the prerequisite for divine revelation. You have to have crisis in order for there to be a sense of clarity on how to move forward. Like, think about that. Like, where in your life have you found yourself needing a cathartic or big experience in order to push through a barrier? This can come out. I've had a number of clients, and I've experienced this myself, where I'm trying to push through a barrier to connect with myself, to connect with God, to connect with the divine. And in order to have that connection, I actually have to create such a problem that it forces some kind of watershed moment. That has been impactful for me in my life, early on. But it's really disruptive as an adult. If I always need a big moment of salvation, I'm saved from this old belief, I'm saved from doing this thing that's not serving me again, then I'm always going to need crisis in order to grow. But you don't. Like, you can move towards growth the same way that you move towards higher elevation on a hike. You don't have to move towards higher elevation by doing like some kind of massive leap and grabbing onto a cliff's edge with one hand. It's like, okay, well, I'm just fucking going. No, like, it can be gradual. It can be enjoyable even. It doesn't actually have to be big and massive and epic. It can just be normal. So also part of the spiritual bypassing connects with repressing our desire under the guise of obedience. If you have a desire, it can lead you to be disobedient. And so obedience might look like cutting off desire, right? Because God really will give you the greatest desires, the desires of your heart. What is that? Jeremiah 29:11. Oh, I know the plans. There you go. I know the plans I have for you. Okay, just put a period after that. I know the plans I have for you. Think about that. Implicit in that statement and how it's communicated in the common Christian myth is you don't know. I know, but you don't know. And those plans that I have are the ones to prosper you, to give you a future, to give you a hope. And therefore, your plans are likely not going to do that. Wow. So if you have a desire, well, how do you know that's from God? It's best to just kind of repress that and move towards blind obedience to the external locus of decision-making and intuition so that you get that life that you want. And last, the spiritual bypassing. I think I mentioned this with my decision to not go to Mardi Gras, but avoiding making plans in order to be open to God, right? Which is so restrictive, ironically. By avoiding making plans so that I can be open to how God wants to use me, life becomes very narrow because you have to make plans. You have to move forward with life, and that requires you to make plans. If you want to have friends, you can't just rely on just pure spontaneity all the time. And if you essentially can't make plans because God actually holds the plans that are best for you, then it's going to really create a situation where you have no way of moving forward in life, moving forward with what you want. There's a phrase, action is the medicine. I've heard it recently a few times, and it has been just really helpful for understanding that when I'm caught in this crossroads thing, it's action is the medicine. It doesn't mean action is the penultimate place of where you want to be, but action is how you begin to process this stuff. Action is how you reclaim your inner authority. It's by doing. And you might not know if what you're doing is the right decision or the wrong decision, but the only way to dissolve that dichotomy of right decision, wrong decision, is to transcend right and wrong into a place of experimentation. If you can experiment with your life, not just like, okay, start where your nervous system can handle it. Like, you want to go to this coffee shop or this coffee shop? You want to stay home or you want to go out? You want to be with friends? You want to be by yourself? Just make a decision. And instead of seeing it as, is this right or is this wrong? See it as an experiment. What lessons can I learn? What can I learn about myself by making this decision and just making the best decision I can in that moment and living with it? And noticing the inner critic, noticing the voices that tell you, oh, that was wrong. I had it this morning. I went to a coffee shop I didn't ultimately I wanted to go to, I wanted to try out, and it was a bad experience. And I had a moment where I was like, I'm really mad at myself for coming here because I could have gone somewhere else. I was like, you know what? Now I know. It's a lesson. I learned I don't want to go back there. I want to go other places. But it's not going to deter me from going to new coffee shops. It just informs me that I don't want to go back to that one. Okay. Planning and choosing is not contrary to alignment. Okay. It's part of how we evolve. We have to make plans. We have to take action, which planning is an action. To make plans, buy the plane ticket, buy the tickets for the soccer game. These are things I've recently done. Do that and just let it go and then move toward it, because where your attention goes, energy flows. If you give attention to an area in your life, energy that you need to animate and heal that area will start to flow that direction. So make a decision, take an action, and allow energy to start moving towards that area in your life so that it can integrate and become just a part of you, right? Like, oh, I can just make decisions. And that's part of my divine gift in the world. Oh, I can just make decisions. I can create. I can make my life. Life is a laboratory, right? It's not a courtroom. It's not a win or lose situation. Life is a win or better win, the dichotomy doesn't have to be right or wrong. It can just be best and even better, right? There's all kinds of things that you can experiment with that. But you don't get clarity in waiting. You get clarity by moving. And when you take motion, when you go into motion, you will likely experience emotion. And emotion is the psychic lubricants that allow you to move through those blockages that you have in your body around decision making. If you make a decision and you have this like bad experience, like a coffee shop that's bad or loud and all that's what I experienced this morning, it may trigger anger. Great. You don't have to get rid of the anger. Let that anger rise up and let it be a catalyst to understand more clearly how you want to live, the decisions you really want to make. Let it bring up all of the anger around not knowing and why that's so frustrating. Let that anger come up, because that anger is moving you forward. It doesn't actually have to be an emotion of shame, guilt. It's an emotion of transformation and transmutation from not knowing what you want to knowing and enacting what you want. So we have to name our dichotomies and dissolve the old ones and transcend into new ones. You're always going to have dichotomies, right? Like one is right or wrong. The new dichotomy can be good and better, great and amazing. If you go into a decision with a sense that this is either going to be really good or absolutely amazing, that will shift how you engage that decision. If you go into a decision with the sense that this is either going to be a lesson about what I don't want or a lesson about what I want more of, that changes everything, right? So I want you to practice a tool that I'm going to put into the show notes. And it's in the Huna tradition. It's called Keawe, and it's a practice led by my friend Kyle, who you hold the two dichotomies. He'll lead you through the whole process, but you hold those two dichotomies and allow yourself to feel them, and then to bring them together to create something new, right? There's a new reality that's waiting for you in this split that has been guiding and deactivating your life for so long. I just want to make this note. Your desires, like what you want, is not something that you have to find. It's something that's leading you. Your desires are not buried. They're there. It's really just a matter of trusting them and letting them guide you. And as they guide you, allowing that to build you up into greater ego strength around your ability to take, your responsiveness, your responsibility for your own life, and your own self-trust to take action. You don't have to live in a state of fear. You can live in a perpetual state of fidelity to yourself. You don't have to live with a sense that a decision is going to connect or disconnect, and there's a right answer. You can live within an atmosphere where you're always connected, and every decision you make is an experiment in greater connection, in greater intuition, in greater abundance, and you are always moving within the atmosphere of the divine, of the source of all love and all energy. To give you kind of a biblical frame of reference here, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, "You have heard it said, but I say," right? He's not, and this is kind of an epiphany for me, Jesus isn't saying you have heard something said that's wrong, but what's right is what I say. Jesus is saying you have heard it said, but I say, as a way of naming the fact that people were living with external voices telling them how they should be. A religious code that said this is how you should do things. And it was detached and disconnected from a sense of self. And here Jesus comes saying, but I say. Jesus, from a Jungian perspective, is an image of the archetypal self, the self within, the divine center that we all live and move and have our being within. Okay? So what is it that you have heard said? What is it that you have heard said that has internalized that isn't serving you? It's not producing what you want. It's not leading to the life that you desire, the peace, the abundance, the calm, the free-flowing decision-making that you've always wanted. What are those voices? What is it that's been said? And then what is it that you say now? Like, what is that sense of self, that intuition now say? You might even want to write those out. Like, I have heard it said, do not lean on your own understanding. But I say unto you, I say, my understanding is good. My understanding is incomplete. But I can know what it is I want and move towards what I want. So practice that. List those out. I will put the Keawe practice in the show notes. Go there and sit with that. Just let it be a meditative space. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to understand the process. Allow yourself to be in process of holding dichotomies and watching as they dissolve into much better dichotomies. Enjoy this and enjoy making decisions for yourself and trusting your own intuition and leaning into what you know to be true at the deepest level. Hi, Michael here. Hey, seriously, thank you for listening and engaging the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel. I trust today's episode gave you something to reflect on or illuminated a new trailhead to your hidden life. If this episode resonated with you, you can subscribe, leave a comment or review, and share it with your people. This really helps spread the word and boosts our digital presence. Remember, growth isn't a straight line, and we're all figuring it out as we go. I'm grateful to be in this unfolding and excavating work with you. Until next time, be yourself. You've got a good self. And remember, it is all a gift.